Today's topic is we're finishing up the protecting your reputation. So I'm going to talk on some, not so much the code of ethics, because we went through those. But I'm going to talk about some instances that Steph and I have had to field in phone calls on some of the problems that are happening today in today's real estate market. And it may be something you've already experienced. I do keep notes on every call I get, but I'm not sure, Amy or Bridget, whether you had this happen, but it is happening quite a bit. So these are some of the professional services I think that we're going to touch on. And then with Charlie, I also am going to talk about it in the team meeting tomorrow too, on a broader scale. But we've had many examples over the weekend. I had several examples of the same thing. So as I said, I'm not sure whether the two of you have experienced, but it's certainly right there around the corner.
Just on that note, because I feel like I might get a call with this situation that I'm dealing with. I was representing the seller. We were in negotiations with a buyer. We had like verbally agreed on something that we were going to counter, and they had agreed, and they're just waiting on us to like send it. But in the meantime, these like other buyers came along, and my seller's like, ooh, maybe we should wait for those buyers. And I am having a hard time, and I'm growing knuckles. I am. And I'm like, okay, I know I am working for my seller. I am not a peacemaker, which I'm trying to realize too, because I'm like, well, in my head, I'm like, I gave that agent my word. Like we had agreed. She's like, any update? Where's the counter? And in my head, I'm like they don't know that like other buyers are going through, and
right.
And I'm like, I don't know about your reputation. Like if I go to her and I'm like, oh, by the way, the reason you haven't received the counter is because these other buyers started going through. It's just like, that's not me, and that's not the reputation I want to have with other agents, but I feel like it is what I have to do. Does that make sense?
It's hard because you have to realize that you are a representative. You're not the mouth. And we're, people of our character like to promise something and stick by it, but we're not the person. We're not the person that owns the house or is getting the money or paying the money. And we always have to remember that, and when you're talking to the other agent too, if I may have talked as if it were my house, and it's not, because the seller has received another offer, and now it's changed the horizon. And it's a risk a buyer takes because, and it's a risk a seller takes. Before they're both signed on paper to agree, the offer is wide open, and either party can withdraw or pull. And so even though you said, oh, it looks great, it looks fine, just say that was the way it was. I'm sorry, but the horizon changed quickly and I can't do anything about it. We didn't have anything in writing. But it is hard. I mean, I've been there and I know what you're talking about. And your reputation isn't based on one thing like that. Your relationship with the other co-broke, and unless they don't have ears and can't listen, is going to be good because you're going to explain the situation. They may not like it. Their clients may be furious about it. But as far as the two agents are concerned, we have to keep a respectful relationship. And you can apologize and everything, but say, it comes down to it's not my house, the seller's house.
Yeah, that's good. Okay.
One of the biggest concerns about this sort of thing is not becoming friendly or maintaining sort of a friendship with your client where you tend to gossip about the other party or the other agent, because it builds up this animus that sometimes is hard to unwind. But I know sometimes when you're trying to represent your client and the other agent is not being forthcoming or whatever, and you start bitching to your client about how this other agent is dropping the ball, or this other agent is crazy, or this other agent is incompetent. And what it does is you are building a huge wall to make this deal not go together. You're building a huge wall to stop the relationship. And remember that the relationship is between the buyer and the seller, and the agents are not as important. The agents are there just to represent their clients, but not to make the deal worse. And I hear a lot of that happening over the years, where an agent can actually alienate a situation so badly that the deal doesn't go together. So when you're talking about what you're saying, your primary concern is to represent your client and keep up a good relationship with the other side, even if the other side is very difficult. But keep up a relationship with them in a very positive way. Always speak positively about the other agent to your client, so that they don't start hating the other agent or the other firm, things like that. So we're in control of making that relationship stay copacetic. One of the main things that I wanted to talk about today, that I actually got 3 phone calls about over the weekend. One was from an agent at Keller Williams complaining about a co-broke agent. One was from a client complaining about her Keller Williams agent. And another one was about a co-broke who was complaining about a KW agent. So I get calls not just from agents, but Kimmy's been very generous to give me all the phone calls, and some of them are going to be from disgruntled clients, and some are going to be from disgruntled co-brokes. And I'm used to it because I've been fielding calls like that for 20 years as a manager. But the theme that was running this week or weekend was lack of communication. I haven't heard from my agent in 4 days. I haven't heard from the other agent all week. We had a couple of instances where an agent literally just dropped off the face of the earth and wasn't communicating with clients or anybody else. And the call that I got from another agent, and truth be told, this other agent has been in the business a long time, same age group that I'm in, and was complaining about the fact that the Keller Williams agent did nothing but text, and texted almost through all the negotiating, through the whole inspection, negotiating the amendment. It ended up in filing a notice of defect, sending a letter from the lender that they couldn't get it, and the camera, all through texting. And this co-broke agent was calling me. She understood the deal was over, it was all legitimate, but she was very upset because she never had a chance to talk to this Keller Williams agent. Because this Keller Williams agent is busy and did everything by text, sending documents electronically, or sending things by email, but neglected to ever pick up the phone and call this agent. This agent called the Keller Williams agent many times and never got a return call or a pickup. At one time, she had her husband call the agent on his mobile phone, and the agent picked up. And when the agent found out who was actually calling, she gave just a very short, cursory answer and no explanation. So it's a sample of what I'm hearing, and something that I really want to bring up today in this, and also I'm going to bring it up tomorrow in the team meeting, because I talked to Charlie about it and he thinks it's important that we address it all. But the idea is, Bridget, you can be a very positive person and thinking about everybody's feelings and all of that, but you're going to run into situations like this, of the other side not cooperating, not communicating, or being negative, and how you handle it and how you treat it. And it's not like we're getting a whole bunch of complaints about Keller Williams agents. Some of the calls that I got were about co-broke agents not calling, not communicating, not returning calls or anything. Have you experienced any of this, Amy?
Yeah, one of the deals that I'm working on right now, I wouldn't say it's a problem, but he does not get back to me very quickly. I think I'm still waiting for some answers from him from this week and even probably last week. But I wouldn't say it's hugely problematic. It's kind of more annoying at this point. And other than that, I probably am guilty of doing too much texting, because I always find it difficult to get in touch with people. So I should probably work on that a little bit more, but it hasn't really been a problem to date.
Yeah, when I was talking to Charlie about it, I said, I hate to blame your generation, Charlie, but I have two sons, one's 40 and one's 37, and they won't answer my phone calls, but they will always text me. And as a result, mom has to text to get a hold of them because they normally won't pick up the phone. So I understand it is a way of life these days. I mean, it's efficient, it's multitasking, it's getting things accomplished. The text is easy. You don't have to get into backstories and what they did on their vacation, by the way, and that sort of stuff. So I get it, but it doesn't work in real estate. A text is cold and literal. It doesn't imply attitude or insinuations or inflections. And if you look at one text, there are probably 4 different ways that it can be interpreted based on how the sender was actually thinking when he sent it. Was he being rude? Was he being bossy? Was he being polite and not truthful? All those things you can pick up in dialogue, talking to people, but you can't pick up in the text. So I just make a concern about, especially in negotiating the price, the terms, in negotiating the amendment for an inspection. All of those things should be done vocally and not by text or email. I just hope I don't come across sounding like a grumpy old grandma, but
I always
think it's really important.
call for those, definitely those types of things. But yeah, I would say that I think I'm a little bit guilty of the first thing you were talking about, where especially since a lot of my clients have just been like my friends, and if we have run into another agent who is a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs,
Okay.
so I'm going to make an effort to not, because they're like, oh my gosh, and I'm like, yeah, they're being kind of crazy. It's easy to fall into it very.
Oh, it sure is.
And it's
I mean, I catch
just,
myself too.
Yeah. And like, it's easy to like put the blame on them than anyone else. So yeah, that's a good point that you're just, it had like, you can tell when it has built a wall and then all of a sudden they like hate the other buyers and it's like, they don't know the buyers.
Mhm.
We don't know if the buyers might not feel this way at all. They might not even know what their agent's doing. So I try to remind them of
Exactly.
that kind of thing, but
Right.
yeah, you can build a wall pretty easily.
Yeah, I think a constant reminder in your head that this is only about the buyer and the seller.
Mhm.
And the personalities. I mean, I've been around real estate personalities for a long time. I've been one myself. My mother was a real estate broker. I know what we're like and how we get things done in this business. And, you know, we have a camaraderie, we have a community, but that's why Steph and I were going through the code of ethics too, you know, article by article, because all these things build your reputation or hurt your reputation if they're not followed. And we're such a small community, even going into Ozaukee County or Waukesha County and Washington County, we're a small community that somebody's reputation sticks with them for a long time. And I can rattle through, I won't, but I can rattle through many, many agents that have been in this business for a long time. And I'd say, oh yeah, she always has really good listings. Or, oh yeah, she always overprices. Or, oh yeah, she's never calls back. I mean, they're tagged, and they, in my own mind, they're tagged because of my experience with them as an agent and as a manager. But
Yeah, I had
try to
one
keep that
example.
to myself.
I had one example of that too, just in the last few days. I think it was an offer was due by 5 o'clock and we decided to write an offer at the last minute. So I got it in at like 4 o'clock and it was for a duplex and they were getting multiple offers. And then I didn't hear back from her that night because I, you know, trying to be patient and not, you know, bug her too much. And then the next morning I called her at 10 a.m. and asked her what the status was. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't get back to you. They picked someone else. I'm like, really? Like you didn't even have the courtesy to tell me. I was so infuriated.
Right. And I've heard a lot of that happening. I don't know whether it's agents just not having the energy to deal with multiple offers and having the courtesy to reply to reply to everybody. But there's no excuse for that. And again, you're going to remember that when you come up with that agent again, you're going to remember that situation. And that's the whole thing that Steph and I are working on this whole last month, is protecting your reputation, making sure that you are thought of as a very fair, even-minded, courteous agent and fun to work with. And we heard stories where in these multiple offer situations, sometimes the offer was picked not on a love letter, not on a price, not on a, you know, any other incentive for the seller. It was picked on the reputation of the agent. You know, the seller, the listing agent is saying to the sellers, oh, I know this agent very well. She's great. She's a real pro. And it doesn't matter whether you're in the same firm or not. That kind of reputation gets you business and gets you success. And I remember when I was very, very new and I worked for Ogden, and Mo Quinlevinet was the manager at that time. And so I had an open house. My husband was a builder and he had some spec houses. So I would hold these spec houses open. And this one, I didn't have much training at Ogden, but I knew Mo very well. And so at this open house, this couple came in and we started talking and realized we had several things in common and everything. And they said to me, oh, we really like talking with you. I think we want to work with you, you know, instead of so-and-so. And I said, okay. That's fun. And this is before buyer agencies were an agreement to be signed. So I went back to Mo and I said, oh, I get the best open house. This couple said they didn't want to work with this other agent anymore and they wanted to work with me. And Mo said to me at that point, you've got one thing going for you in this market, and that's your reputation. You do that, that other agent's going to be down on you, is going to spread the word, and that's going to sour your reputation. I mean, great for me to hear before I committed seppuku on that. So, I mean, one of the other things that I wanted to talk about with this protecting your reputation is negotiating commission between the two agents. First of all, it's never done within the contract. And a lot of people think that they can add a provision in the contract that say the commission should be raised to 2.4, where say it was offered as 2 point in MLS, or they can, you know, say all different things, especially in a for sale by owner. They put in the offer that the seller is to pay the agent 2.4 of the purchase price and things. Just to remember that the offer is not the place for agents to ever negotiate commission. It's totally separate from the offer. The offer is about the seller and the buyer, and only the seller and the buyer's money, has nothing to do with the agent's commission or compensation. All of that, and I can always help anybody that wants it, all of that can be done on a separate piece of paper, an agreement, where the resolve is signed by the parties involved, and but it is kept out of the contract and in a separate agreement. So say the listing agent and the buyer's agent want to reduce their commission to get the deal together. And if that happens, the listing agent and the listing broker sign a paper saying that their company agrees to reduce the commission by whatever percentage, and the selling broker, the buyer's agent, and that buyer's agent broker also sign this agreement. So, and then it's put into command, you know, so that they can do the commission. But anybody who ever needs help in drafting a letter like that or an agreement like that, let me know.
Yeah, I think as a listing agent, I one time got an offer and it said, like, in the additional provisions, buyer agent's commission to be 2%.
Mhm.
You know, they were trying to help their
Mhm.
cause. But yeah, they didn't have, that's good to know. They didn't have any other documents or.
Well, the actual wording, if you want to change the commission either up or down in say a for sale by owner, and you want to make sure that the seller, for sale by owner seller, is going to pay you, instead of saying seller to compensate agent 2.4% or something, you have to preamble word it by saying, on behalf of the buyer, buyer's agent to be compensated by seller 2.4% of the purchase price, successful closing. What you're saying is the buyer is saying to the seller, because that's what the offer is, a communication only between those two. The buyer is saying to the seller, I'm working with this buyer's agent that I want to be paid by you, Mr. Seller. So the agent can ask for it, but the buyer can ask for it in behalf of the buyer to the seller. So what your example was, that was a direct request, and it can't be a direct request. It has to be through the buyer to the seller, or through the seller to the buyer.
Okay.
And again, I can help with wording if you ever need any wording on it, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but that's basically what I wanted to talk about. These were brought up in, I think it was June's WRA magazine. And it tied in very much with what Steph and I have been doing and going through all the code of ethics. But it's just something that we should all be reminded of on a regular basis on how it protects ourselves and protects our business. You have any other questions or thoughts?
I have a
Still have
question
plenty
on
of
a
time.
separate topic.
Sure.
So I'm representing the seller. We sent a counter off buyer. The buyer, this is the one I was talking about, then verbally we decided on something else and they're waiting for me to send the new counter.
Mhm.
If my seller decides to go with a different buyer and I need to rescind the counter offer I sent, because it doesn't expire till midnight, how do you do that? Just in case. I hope I don't have to do that.
Well, you can do it verbally right away. It has to be done before they sign it,
Right.
obviously. So you can do it verbally, and I think it's important to follow it up with either an email or even a notice that says that the counter offer dated such and such by so-and-so is hereby rescinded or
Okay.
withdrawn.
So probably have my seller sign the notice, and maybe do it at like the same time. Because
Right.
hypothetically, if you verbally told someone on the phone, could they like quickly then like sign it? That's what, okay. Okay. That's
Right.
good to know.
And once it's signed, you can't rescind
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Right, but it's the same thing, that I'm saying. That's why verbal agreements really, I mean, they're not legal in the state of Wisconsin to begin with, but they also don't hold any water. And an offer is open until all parties sign and deliver.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay.
That was it. Trying to think if there's been anything else that's come up lately. I think I might have asked you this, but I'm just a little hazy on the whole, like my friends who are like, well, they lose out on a few offers. They want to be able to put in like a cash offer or something. They got a rich grandma or a rich parents, and they're like, can we use their proof of funds? And I've told them, the risk there is you don't have a financing contingency. So you are buying this home. And if you can't end up getting a loan, like your grandma or whoever is buying the home. But if people want to do that, then how do you do that with the contract? Because if they don't want it in grandma's name, but it's grandma's proof of funds.
Right. It has to be in the grandmother's name, and then you say grandmother's name and or assigns, so that it can get through the closing, and then it's going to be assigned to the kids. That's one way of doing it. And assigned is just quick claim the grandma out and put their name on it. The better way to do it is to have the grandma gift the money to the kids. And then it becomes their money and they can show that gift as the proof of funds. That's probably the cleaner way to do it rather than to go through a quick claim deed. So,
and if they don't actually want to gift the money, but they're okay doing that for the purpose of the offer, can they do that? Or
well, it has to be
Yeah,
in the
gift it back.
buyer's checking account or a savings account.
okay.
So whether they call it a gift or not, it's got to be in the buyer's account. So if it's still in the grandmother's account, she has to be the buyer.
Okay.
Until, okay.
So do some people like transfer the money and then like transfer it back probably? Like it.
Well, it all depends on where's the money at closing. I mean,
if they end up
if
getting a loan.
As long as it's not contingent, it's not part of the offer, but they can certainly get a loan for the money. on the side. And it even, there's a provision in the offer to purchase that says that the seller has to let an appraiser in if they're getting a loan on the side. It's not a contingency in the offer, but they need to get this loan in order to have the money at the closing table. And, you know, the idea that, I mean, writing a cash offer still has to come with proof of funds. So
Right.
that's the key, you know, on how it's done.
So the only way to do it is if grandma transfers the money into the kid's account and then they transfer it back after closing.
Well, where's the money for the, oh, you mean, and then the kids get a loan.
Yep, the kids get a loan. Because
Right.
I ran
And
into
they
that
just,
too.
they pay her back. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest that to my buyer, that how you just described it, Bridget, and then I'm like, I don't know how this is gonna work. So it's not a very good scenario, but I guess it's still possible.
And it's always good to have a good lender that you're working with, so that you can get the lender's perspective of it. You know, the lender needs to be made aware that they've written, you know, that this is the kind of offer they written. They really have to get this loan in order to close, to pay grandma back. But the lender has to know all that. The lender has to decide whether that's too iffy, it's too close to mortgage fraud, all those, you know, things that we don't want to be participating in. And so you always check it out with, because a lot of these cases are very individual, you know, how much, how, when, you know. So the easiest way, obviously, is to gift the money, and they can pay grandma back any way they want to later. I mean, they can even take out a home equity loan on the house and pay her back that
Okay.
way. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Joan.
That's it for the day. Thank you. Thank you both for coming.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Bridget.
See ya.